On this edition of Pens Pulse, presented by S&T Bank, we're looking into the men behind the bench of the Pittsburgh Penguins. From Red Sullivan to Mike Sullivan, we examine the unique personalities of past Penguins head coaches.
Not impressed. It's a pathetic performance.
Paul Steigerwald explores the lasting influence Badger Bob Johnson has had on the team and his infectious motto, "It's a great day for hockey."
We planned to carry on, and his goal was to win Stanley Cups, and we're going to go on with that.
And finally, we sit down with head coach Mike Sullivan to discuss his impact on the team since joining the Penguins.
I think as you evolve as a coach and you go through experiences, I think you learn that sometimes less is more and that you don't have to give them all the information, you have to give them the right information.
From PPG Paints Arena, this is Pens Pulse. This portion of Pens Pulse is brought to you by your Western PA Honda dealers.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Pens Pulse presented by S&T Bank. I'm Selena Pompiani. Over the team's 50-plus years of existence, 22 men have stood here behind the bench for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Each one of them brought their own unique set of skill and personality to the game. Paul Steigerwald has more.
If you are looking for a long, stable career, head coaching in the NHL is probably not for you. With nearly 24 head coaches, the Penguins have had a carousel of personalities behind the bench over the years. The very first coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins was Red Sullivan. After only 2 seasons, he was replaced by yet another Red, Hall of Fame defenseman and center, Red Kelly.
Red played with my brother, played with Marcel in Detroit and then in Toronto. He was an excellent coach, but he was a different kind of coach. And he never got really excited, and he never swore. I respected him for that. He was a gentle coach.
Former players becoming coaches is nothing new in the NHL. Gene Ubriaco and Ken Schinkel, both members of the original 1967 roster, each spent time behind the team's bench.
Jack Riley asked me if, he says, we're going to make a change here. And I said, I don't really want to coach. At that time, I was maybe the top scoring right winger. So I said, you're taking me out of the lineup. You're not replacing me. I had talked to a friend of mine, and he says, you don't get a chance to start at the top very often. Now I'm coaching the guys that I was friends with, and you got to discipline them, and that's probably the hardest area that I had.
While Schinkel was concerned about disciplining his friends, former Pens center and broadcaster Eddie Olczyk had the delicate task of coaching the owner of the team in his first opportunity as a head coach.
You really don't coach Mario Lemieux, you just direct him, and he was a captain, he owned the team, and he's playing. That doesn't happen very often in professional sports.
Olczyk's relationship with Mario and the game of golf would come in handy on October 18, 2003, when the Penguins were searching for their first win under their new coach.
If you ever asked Mario about Willie Wood, he would probably talk about my awful pick in the Masters draft, but then also probably would remember the play that I called. And we were playing against the Red Wings. To start the third period, I drew up a face-off play. I said, Mario, you're going to win the draw. You're going to get it back to our defense, and they're going to go D to D with it. They're going to fire the puck at you. And when they fire the puck at you, Chris Chelios is going to run at you in the middle of the ice. And all I want you to do is to tip it by him. And when you tip it by him, we're going to have a 2-on-1 from the red line in. And Coltsy's going to get it, and he's going to fire it over to Marty Straka, and Marty's going to fire a top shelf, and we're going to tie the game up, and then we're going to win the game.
Look at the puck in, going for it as Koltsov gives it to Straka right there. He shoots and scores! We got a brand new hockey game. Marty Straka ties it for the Penguins. It's 3-3, and I'll be cow-kicked.
I certainly went up a couple of notches in our players' eyes for sure after calling that shot. And we ran it a bunch of times after that, and it never worked.
Olczyk's job was to sell hope that rebuilding the team through the draft would lead to a better future for the Penguins. Unfortunately, he wasn't around long enough to see that future through. He was replaced by a demanding former Montreal Canadiens coach named Michel Therrien. Nicknamed Iron Mike, Therrien's blunt opinion of his team's performance is legendary.
Not impressed. It's a pathetic performance. Half of the team doesn't care. Are we going to be happy to play 8 minutes? I'm not going to be happy to play 8 minutes. Tonight it looks like men's against boys.
Clearly the Penguins' performance was getting on Therrien's nerves, but he wasn't exactly nervous like his French-Canadian predecessor Mark Boileau was before Game 7 in 1975.
Are you nervous?
Yeah, I get nervous. If you can't get nervous about the hockey game, then you know, it's no fun. I'm always nervous. My hands are sweaty. My pits are wet. But I'll be okay once they drop the puck.
Sadly, the Penguins lost 1-0, blowing a 3-0 series lead to the New York Islanders. Boileau was replaced the following season by Ken Schinkel, who along with Eddie Johnston had the distinction of being named head coach on 2 separate occasions in their careers. In 1997, Johnston was replaced by former San Jose head coach Kevin Constantine. He had led an 8th-seeded team to a series win in 1994 over the heavily favored Detroit Red Wings, and then repeated that performance in 1999 as the Penguins took on the number 1 seeded New Jersey Devils.
Straka trying to get by. He does. Slays it across. Goal!
Constantine made the Penguins a much better defensive team, but he would only last 2 months into the following season. Replacing Constantine was the 1980 Miracle on Ice head coach and longtime scout for the Penguins, legendary Herb Brooks.
Every coach has their own ideas, and there are some coaches in the league that are very defensive oriented, and they play a real tight checking game. I'm a little bit different, play a little bit a very up-tempo game, and I think you get better that way.
Herb only committed to 1 season behind the bench before becoming the Penguins' director of player development. Prior to his untimely death in a car accident, he helped the Penguins scouting department decide on who to pick at the 2003 NHL Draft.
For a week we talked about it, and back and forth. And some guys really wanted Eric Staal. And Herb and I sat down and we said, you know, if we're gonna win a cup, you win it with a goalie. So we kind of influenced the rest of the crew and said, you know, I think we're gonna lean towards Marc-Andre. And it panned out pretty good.
Let's not forget Mike Johnston, Ivan Halinka, Pierre Kramer, Bob Barry, Luann Gotti, and Johnny Wilson.
Good look at Johnny Wilson, who coached Team Canada last year.
Look at old Johnny Winks. He's one of the funniest guys on or off the ice.
And Penguins lifer and former player and coach Rick Kehoe. Each one of these men are prominent figures because they're all a part of Penguins history.
Coming up next on Pens Pulse.
Maybe the first day, you guys are like, who is this guy? And then the first month, well, who is this guy? But he's that way every day. And all of a sudden, like, well, this is sort of fun.
This portion of Pens Pulse is brought to you by Kent State University.
Welcome back to Pens Pulse, presented by S&T Bank. I'm Paul Steigerwald. As we look back at the past head coaches of the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's important to give special recognition to the 3 coaches prior to Mike Sullivan who led the Penguins to the Stanley Cup. Each one of them brought the traits necessary in the formation of the puzzle that is a championship team.
Question now that you're going to get us for a couple of weeks is, now what?
Well, we're going to take some time to evaluate the organization, the staff, the playing personnel, and see what kind of organization we have here, and then make some inroads towards a coach at that point. But I don't want to get into what type of coach we want until I see what type of organization we have and what's going to fit best. I realized that we needed a guy like Bob Johnson. And we were at the Met Center in Minneapolis, and there was a payphone outside the dressing room while the guys were getting ready for practice or the game itself. I went to the payphone and called Bob in Colorado Springs. He was running USA Hockey at the time. And I said, I think you'd be a perfect fit for this team. And he said, well, I'd love to do it. I can't right now. He said, I've got a job to do here, and I'm not going to be available till June. So I said, that's fine. We'll wait till June, but we'd like to have you as our coach.
That wasn't the only call that Craig Patrick made that day. He also reached out to an old friend that Craig's father, Lynn Patrick, hired in 1967.
I coached Craig Patrick in junior, and his dad brought me to St. Louis originally, the late Lynn Patrick. So I got a call from Craig that they were reestablishing the franchise in Pittsburgh. They wanted to know if I would want to go and be director of player development, and I said, well, I don't mind getting a chance, but I don't want to leave Buffalo. I was able to stay in Buffalo. I was able to travel to Pittsburgh. It was an easy trip, and that's how I got started again.
On June 1st, 1990, Scotty Bowman and Bob Johnson officially joined the Penguins organization and immediately sought to change the culture of a team that went over 23 years without reaching the Stanley Cup final.
Things had been done a certain way for a long period of time, and he was going to change this culture in a positive way. And maybe the first day, you guys are like, who is this guy? And then the first month, well, who is this guy? But he's that way every day. And all of a sudden, like, well, this is sort of fun.
Get out of there, Green. Hey, move it. That's right, Frank, that's right, Frankie. Dig it out.
I'm always optimistic. I mean, it's the only way to live life, Think you're gonna win. Don't hang your head. Life's too short. Every day's a bonus. Don't ever forget it, guys, it's a bonus.
With Badger Bob behind the bench, the Penguins won their first Patrick Division title, and on May 25th, 1991, they shut out the Minnesota North Stars 8-0 for their first Stanley Cup.
Hey, we're proud of everybody, goddamn. Put it on!
In the afterglow of the Penguins' accomplishment, tragedy would strike the team, making Bob Johnson's remarks on life ring true. He suffered a brain aneurysm in the summer of '91 and later was diagnosed with brain cancer that would ultimately take his life in November of that year.
We planned to carry on, and his goal was to win Stanley Cups. And we're going to go on with that goal of his and totally have Bob's memory in the back of our minds at all times.
With emotions riding high, Bowman, who was acting as interim head coach since the start of training camp, stepped behind the bench to carry on Bob's work.
I wasn't burned out as a coach, but I'd had my fill of coaching, and I didn't think I'd ever have to coach again. I tried to do everything as similar to Bob Johnson. It was Bob Johnson the year before, and I tried to say every decision I would say, what would Bob have done in this instance? I tried to do that.
The Penguins came back from a 3-1 deficit against the Washington Capitals in the opening round of the playoffs, and after falling behind 2-1 against the New York Rangers, ended up winning 11 straight on their way to their second consecutive Stanley Cup.
Somebody looking down by the name of Badger Bob Johnson is watching this and enjoying it with all the emotion that he carried to the Penguin squad last year.
The coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins will always be Bob Johnson. And thanks to Bob Johnson's vision, all of this today is possible.
Johnson's vision lives on to this day. His saying, "A great day for hockey," has been adopted by the Penguins as their slogan, and his incredibly positive outlook has influenced coaches who have followed, including another American-born man who was in his first year as head coach of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins.
Sunday, I was coaching in Wilkes-Barre. Got in a car after that game in Wilkes-Barre and drove to Long Island. And I believe it was a 2 o'clock game or a 3 o'clock game on Monday in Long Island. So the 9:30 meeting was in the hotel. It was the first chance I had to talk to the players, talk to the team, talk to the organization, and then we were getting ready to play a 2 o'clock game.
There he is, Dan Bylsma. He's the youngest man behind the bench.
Bylsma's jump to the NHL was a result of the club's underperformance throughout most of the season. His challenge was turning around a team that was 5 points out of a playoff spot.
My message was simple. We have 25 games to prove people wrong, 25 games to show people how we can play. And the players took that challenge immediately.
The team responded by going 18-3-4 to make it back to the playoffs. Then they defeated the Detroit Red Wings in a rematch of the previous year's Stanley Cup final to earn the team's third Stanley Cup.
It's unbelievable bringing this trophy back to Pittsburgh, the city of champions. It's much better than Hockey Town.
Disco Dan, as he was called, would spend 6 seasons behind the bench with the Penguins, becoming the winningest coach in franchise history and the first Penguins coach to win the Jack Adams Award as the top coach in the NHL.
That award is really it's a team award and it's a player award. It's not, those players really bought into how we play, and you win the award because you surprise everybody that you can still win hockey games. I'm the one who gets the hardware, but it's really it's really their award. It's really the team award.
I want to ask you if you miss Dan Potash.
I definitely do miss Dan Potash. I get a text occasionally, but
don't make a fist in front of me unless you're going to use it. Told you, it's a new me. Hey!
Okay, well, I got to use it then.
Oh!
It's on camera. We don't
okay. All right.
Like you made me hit you.
I have 5 witnesses plus all those in TV land.
Yeah.
He hit me.
Dan and Dan, the unscripted Dan and Dan I miss. I have never gotten it back anywhere I've gone. I haven't got the Dan and Dan back.
After the break.
To be part of a distinguished group of coaches that have gone before me to coach this great organization, it's a proud moment for me.
Welcome back to Pens Pulse, presented by S&T Bank. I'm Paul Steigerwald here with Penguins coach Mike Sullivan. And Mike, did you envision yourself being a coach when you were playing?
I knew I wanted to coach in some capacity when I finished playing. I wasn't sure at what level or what capacity that might be. I did not envision coaching at the NHL level. Coaching has always been something that's been in the back of my mind. I've always had a passion for the game and wanting to be around the rink and being around the sport.
You're a student of the game. Is there also such a thing as being a student of coaching?
Oh, I think so for sure, because there's so much involved with coaching. It's not just trying to understand the evolution of the game and the modern strategies and tactics, but it's about how do you get the most out of people? How do you manage people? How do you inspire people to be at their best? I don't think a day goes by that I don't drive home from the rink and ask myself the question, did I do a good job today as far as my job and how I interacted with our players, or did I prepare them the right way, or did I give them too much information or not enough information? And those are all questions that we ask ourselves daily. Not only do we become students of the game, we're trying to get better at the craft of coaching itself.
The Pittsburgh Penguins have made a coaching change. It's going to be Mike Sullivan, and I believe that he's the guy that can come in and really take control and really make some guys more accountable than when we're not performing at the level that we think we should be.
When you first took over as the team, I referred to you as a commander. Did you consciously have a mindset of wanting to be that kind of a guy?
When you look at coaches in any sport for that matter, and there's all different types, the most important thing in my mind is that you're true to yourself, that you don't try to be someone that you're not, that you just be yourself, and that's what I've tried to do. I'm not always a warm and fuzzy guy, I know that. I think it's hard when you're trying to manage strong personalities if you don't have one yourself and have strong convictions and how you think you should do things or the way you should run a team. At the end of the day, it isn't really something that I consciously try to apply. It's more just trying to be true to myself.
Mike, this is going to be your 400 games as an NHL head coach. If you could go back to Mike Sullivan before your first game, what's the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I didn't even know that. I'm not sure what kind of advice I'd give myself. What I can tell you is that I'm very different today than I was before my first coaching experience.
Could you just describe maybe where you've made adjustments or consciously changed as a coach over time?
Experience is the best teacher for all of us in any endeavor, and hockey's no different, and coaching's no different. I've been through now 17 plus years of coaching in all different capacities at the NHL level, and you go through successes, you go through failures, and so when you go through those experiences, you learn. When I think about how I've changed as a coach, when you're a young coach, you want to dot every I and cross every T, and you want to make sure that you prepare each player and your group for every possible scenario. I think as you evolve as a coach and you go through experiences, I think you learn that sometimes less is more, and that you don't have to give them all the information, you have to give them the right information. And sometimes you've got to look the other way. If a player makes mistakes, you have to allow a player an opportunity for some room to grow and to problem solve themselves. I think that's probably the biggest area where I've grown as a coach, is knowing when I think I need to step in and maybe more importantly, knowing when I need to step back and allow players to explore the game a little bit and solve some of the challenges on their own.
We're right in this hockey game. There's a lot of hockey left. Think about just breaking the plane. If you can get past the halfway point or to the far post, then think about getting it back to him and let him get off that wall.
It sounds like you're talking about empowering players at times.
One of the biggest things that I've tried to do since I've taken the Penguins over is to give some ownership to what's going on here, to the type of team that we're trying to be, to the players. As I tell them all the time, it's their team, it's not ours. At the end of the day, I have to make decisions that I think are best for the team. That's part of my job as the head coach. But I think empowering people is a good way to inspire and get the most out of people. And sometimes the best way to gain control is to relinquish control. In those instances, as a coaching staff, we believe in that. We talk a lot with our leadership group and with our younger players, and we try to communicate daily with different players or different groups of our team in order to make sure that we're all on the same page and give guys an opportunity to give us feedback to what's going on so that we can become the best team we can be.
There have been 22 coaches in the history of the Penguins. You're the only one that's won 2 Stanley Cups. How does that make you feel to be a part of that?
It certainly makes me feel proud that we've accomplished what we have to this point. I'm grateful to the players that I've had the privilege of coaching. This is, bar none, the best group of players that I've ever been associated with, and I push them hard as their coach, but it's only because we think so highly of them and we know they're capable of so much. To be part of a distinguished group of coaches that have gone before me to coach this great organization, it's a proud moment for me.
Do you know what the name of the first coach of the Penguins was?
I don't.
He has the same last name as you.
Really?
Red Sullivan.
That's, I learned something new today.
So we come full circle.
That's
Thanks,
great.
Sir. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. So that'll do it for this edition of Pens Pulse, presented by S&T Bank. For Selena Pompiani and our entire Pens TV crew, I'm Paul Steigerwald. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
And as you see in the locker room, it's a great day for hockey. That's what he did on a daily basis. I'll see that saying and signs in a lot of different rinks, and I've got it in our rink in Madison where we play at, and it's just sort of reflect on a lifetime commitment to growing the game, being passionate about, and the understanding that it is a game. You need to enjoy it, and I think that's one of his big selling tools that he was able to do. In a short period of time, you end up hoisting the Stanley Cup at the end of the year, and the rest is history.